Hey everyone, my name is Brittany. Welcome back to my channel. And today I'll be attempting to read the entirety of the Red Queen series.
It's Brittany, bitch.
This book started it all. Back in, I believe it was 2015, I read this for the first time and I just fell completely in love with it. And then I realized the sequel was not even out yet. It was on my TBR, and then when I was dog sitting, I went to the library to go pick up a book to read while I was, at this house, and this was on the shelf. So I decided to just pick it up, and I really, really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars. Now, I kind of want to see if this is still a 5-star book because I really don't know if it's going to stand the testament of time. However, I still do remember a lot of people's names in here, but I don't remember the nitty-gritty bits, which is kind of good because then I can kind of re-experience them. The problem is there's a very, very, very large betrayal towards the end that I cannot forget, and I will let you know what that is when we get there. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna spoil it right now. Listen. If you're watching this and you've never read any of these books and you don't want to be spoiled, just click off the video. Come back whenever you hit them up, okay? Listen, I will never forget what happened in this book because it tore me apart. It ripped my heart out of my ass. Literally from my ass. We are following Mare, and she's a red, and the royalty and elite people is rolled silver, so their blood is actually silver, and they tend to have superpowers. So everybody has a different power, kind of like X-Men, but with blood, okay? So she is a red, but magically she finds out that she has a power. So she can control like lightning and electricity, and she didn't realize that until she happened to be at the palace. But let me go back to the beginning. Mare is our main character, so she has the worst fucking name in history. Her name is Mare Barrow. She sounds like a fucking wheelbarrow. I hate the name, but okay, listen, it's terrible, but I've never forgotten it. Her name is Mare, and she's very, very poor, and her family's very poor. They're reds, and they're struggling to survive. So Mare's sister Giza is like a very talented seamstress, and kind of what sets this whole thing off is that Mare ends up getting in trouble, and then Giza loses. She doesn't lose her hand, but all the bones in her sewing hand are crushed, and so the family's kind of like, fuck. And Mare ends up meeting Cal, who happens to be like the prince that's like next in line for the throne, but she doesn't know that he's like in disguise, and he ends up getting her a job at the palace as a servant to like help her out. She basically tried to like pickpocket him or pickpocketed somebody else, and he noticed and like gave her like a giant coin and just helped her out. So just out of the goodness of his heart, she became a servant, and she had to leave her family. But then while she's at the palace, they're trying to pick like a princess for the prince. So eventually this woman should be queen, right? And so all the women have to like show off their talents. And I don't remember exactly what happens, but I know that Mare somehow like shows off that she has lightning. So now they concoct this entire story that she's actually like the long lost princess of one of like the dead houses, like Thanos or something. And I don't remember the houses at all. I don't remember that at all. I just remember like this giant arena, and she accidentally shows off that she has lightning. So now they have to pretend that she is a silver who didn't know she was a silver and was like hidden away in like the red town for her safety. I'm telling you, my memory of this book is incredible. Like I remember so much. And then there's a whole plot to like overthrow the crown. I don't really understand why that was like ever a big thing. I don't really care. But what pissed me off was I fell in love with Prince Maven, who is Prince Cal's like half brother. Listen, I fell in love with that bitch. He had a hold on my heart, and he betrays her towards the end, and I will never forget that. So I'm not sure if this book will be as good going into it a second time, just because like I remember so much about it, but also like I can never relive that betrayal. Like if I could reread a book for the first time and not know what was happening, this is one of those books, because it was so heart-wrenching when it happened, and I was so fucking shocked. I mean, there's betrayals all throughout. Like all these characters are very morally gray. I don't think this is like Hunger Game-esque at all to me. And I remember when I first read this book, people compared it to Red Rising, and after having read Red Rising, I see absolutely zero fucking similarities. None. Other than the fact that people are called red. This book is way better. Sorry. Anywho, I have the entire series. I want to kind of give them a shot. I did not realize there was 4 books. I really only thought there was 3. So I have Red Queen, and then I have Glass Order, which is the second novel. And I don't know why this one came in hardback. I don't know. So I have a paperback, a hardback, and then the third novel, King's Cage, is also a paperback. And then the last giant whopping novel is War Storm, which is fucking ginormous hardback. Was not expecting that. So listen, I do have all these books on audio as well, so I'm gonna try to attempt the audio, but I haven't really been in an audiobook mood. And sometimes I have to be in the mood to enjoy an audiobook. Work has been like really busy, and sometimes when it's busy, it's really hard for me to focus on like listening to something, so I just have to like put on music or something else that I don't have to like pay attention to. This is really my year of revisiting my inner child and my inner teenager, and I used to love YA dystopian, and I still do. I definitely do, but I wanted to revisit the ones that just really gave me those feels, and that's why I wanted to attempt this series, because I only ever read the first one, and then I just completely completely stopped reading after college. I was just so burnt out of reading that I just completely fucking stopped, and I never picked up the sequels to this. And also I was so upset because I really wanted the sequel and I had no idea this was a new book, and the fact that I had to wait, I just completely forgot about it. So I want to go ahead and go forward with this. The only one I've actually read is this one so far. So this is going to be a reread, and everything else is going to be completely new. So I'm really excited to get into this, but I'm also like terribly scared that like maybe I won't like it. Maybe it won't live up to the hype I originally had it, because this book had me in a fucking chokehold. Like, it really did. And also this cover is just stunning. And I just don't know. I also don't know if reading on audio is going to affect my enjoyment of it, because I feel like some books are meant to be read either way, and I really loved it reading it physically, so I just don't know how I'm going to feel about it. But when I finish this, I will let you guys know, because I've already rambled for way too fucking long about this book, and then I'll actually fill you in on how I feel about this. Returned Red Queen to the library, and I have to say that this was not a 5-star read upon reread. Was this a bad book? No, but I think I'm gonna give this 3.5 stars and round up to 4 stars. I really enjoyed rereading this, but I think since I knew so much about this plot, the magic was completely lost on me. Like, reading this book for the first time was so fucking shocking, and it is so memorable that reading it a second time, you don't have those surprises. And I'm not saying I need a surprise in order to enjoy a book, but I feel like the betrayals for me were such a big part of why I loved this book, and I just feel like my heart had been ripped out of my body. But reading it again, like, I already knew it was gonna happen, it wasn't the same. And as an older adult reading this, I also can like point out some of the plot holes and inconsistencies throughout this, so it's also like a little less enjoyable because I can kind of look at it a little more critically. I also realized that Mare as a character has like no personality. Like, I literally could give two shits about her. I actually ended up caring more about the side characters, which is really a surprise for me. I like so many other characters, but her as a person like could absolutely give zero shits. I think it's also because she's so incredibly self-centered too. Like, it's so frustrating to watch her like see these terrible betrayals, and all she can think about is like, I was betrayed. Bitch, really? Seriously though, are you really that selfish and you're that self-centered that whenever you see somebody's father being fucking beheaded like via mind control, and you just think, oh, Maven betrayed me? What the fuck is wrong with you, dude? It was so frustrating to watch her be this character, and I just really didn't care for her at all. She also barely talks about her family. Like, she kind of brings up her brothers every now and then, but like when something bad happens to somebody else with their brothers, she's like, oh, whatever, like, fuck them. You have zero sympathy for other people. I understand that you may not like that person, but like, she's not ruthless like a Jude from The Cruel Prince or something, and she doesn't own it. Like, she just like expects to like not see the violence or something. She's like, I don't want to remember like the names of the people we basically murdered. Like, I can't have that weighing on my conscience. Are you fucking joking right now? You're the most selfish, self-centered little bitch. With all that being said, I still loved how dark and gray this book is. Like, the morality of all the characters is always at question, and I really like not knowing like who you can trust at any moment in time. I find that really titillating. I think that's why I've always been drawn to this book, because I just want to know who's betraying who and for what reason. And the motives are really good. That's something I find really surprising, is like every character has a good motivational backstory as to why they're doing something, and it makes sense. And I think upon reread, I actually care more about like this whole Silver versus Red situation, because when I first read this, I honestly just felt so betrayed by Maven, who like I was shipping Mare with because I loved Maven so much, that I just kind of like didn't think about the fact that we find out at the end that there were more people like Mare, like Reds, who have silver qualities. And we find out at the very end that her brother Shade is actually alive, and he has his own like silver power, and he is actually obviously alive, and they're like being trained or something, or being kept secret, and because they're trying to experiment and see like what's going on with these people that have red blood but silver powers. So I'm excited to try the next book, which is Glass Sword, and I really am curious where it's gonna go. And this one I haven't read. Like, I haven't read anything past the first one, so I'm actually really excited to see if I'm gonna like the series, like the rest of the series, and how that's gonna go. So I'm gonna go into it fresh, and I'm gonna try to go into it with zero expectations and see how I feel about it. This reading vlog has taken a turn for the worse. I want to DNF Glass Sword so fucking bad. This novel is suffering from second book syndrome. It is really boring. Nothing is fucking happening. It is just like fucking Mockingjay from from the Hunger Games trilogy. Like, we're supposed to give a shit that our main character Mare is going around with a bunch of her friends and trying to like recruit new bloods, which are like the people who have special powers. Obviously they're red blood, but they have like silver powers. They're called new bloods. It's like ridiculous. I think my issue with this book is I don't care about these characters literally at all. I really liked the first book, and I think it's because I really liked the love triangle between Mare, Cal, and Maven. And now that Maven is kind of out of the picture, it's just not really like worth it for me. Also, Maven is like a big baddie. Like, he is like a villain, honey. At the point that I'm at, like, I just got to the 60% mark. There was like a murdered child, like a baby, and Maven left a note being like, if you like come be my queen, like this won't keep happening. Yeah, no. I'm also just upset because I really thought I was gonna love this series and fly through it in like a week. I'm still on number 2. I'm really struggling to read this, and I really want to DNF this entire project because I just don't know how much more of this book I can take. I only read 10% last night, and I struggled through that for like an hour and a half. Like, you're going city to city and you're trying to find these new bloods before Maven does, which they don't. Like, they are getting some new bloods, but Maven is beating them to the punch and then killing the new bloods and leaving a message saying, hey, like, I got to them before you. So they're only getting like half of the new bloods they want to, and they're kind of like creating like an X-Men training army, which is like fine, but it's not very entertaining for a story. Like, it's really not, especially if I don't care about the characters. Like, I need a better plot, and the plot right now is just absolute trash. This book is just like kind of insufferable. I've been reading it for weeks. I'm gonna try to soldier on and finish this last 40%, but it has been atrocious up to this point. Like, this whole second book, I literally just cannot get behind it. I even listened to the first 30% audio. I've literally read 30% over like a 2-week period. It has been that rough. Like, nothing is happening. I don't care about any of the characters. Like, give me something interesting. Like, you could have a small showdown in this book or something. I just feel like going from city to city, recruiting people is not fucking interesting. And then I don't know why Mare's involved in the first place, because I understand she's like the lightning girl and she has these powers, but like, she should not be training other people on how to use their powers because she just figured out hers anyway, and she's not very good with people. My last point I will make of this clip is that this is so much like Mockingjay, because I can literally see how this author could have taken Mockingjay and insert Mare for Katniss and like assumes that we love this character and we want to support her. And just like the way that they even like say certain things, like it's literally Mockingjay with like way less danger and like people we love. And even parts of Mockingjay are fucking boring. Like, nobody wants you like going place to place like filming. Like, it's not a very interesting fucking concept. At least at the end of Mockingjay, there's obviously like a big showdown and lots of crazy shit happens, but like the first half of Mockingjay is literally boring as fuck. And that's exactly what's happening here, but this entire book has been boring. Like, literally nothing has happened. I don't care about anybody who has died. I don't care about any of these characters. The coolest part of this was Maven leaving a fucking note with a dead infant. That was fucking weird and crazy. And then apparently Maven has found some kind of like weapon he can use against Mare. But like, I also don't understand how that scene happened. Like, literally Maven was right next to her using this device, and then he just chooses to leave. And then Mare like wakes up 4 days later after like he basically scarred her with like, you know, like when you get hit by lightning, you get like those lightning strike scars. So now she has those all over her body because he found a way to use her lightning against her. Like, cool, but like, how does she even escape? Like, all her friends somehow escaped. Like, did Maven and his team just like leave? That is a really weird plot hole, and I just read that part and I'm still fucking confused. Like, how does she even get out of there to not wake up 4 days later? Like, how did they get her out? Maven was right next to her with this fucking device, like in her ear. Did he just leave? I don't fucking know. Anyway, I will get back to you guys when I finish this book, if I do fucking finish it, because to be honest, I'm really questioning this whole reading vlog, and I'm very, very tempted to maybe just finish the second book and then take a break for like a month or two and come back to you later, because I just have zero inclination to read this series, especially if the rest of it's gonna be like this book. Like, no. So quick update, I am still only 80% of the way into Glass Sword, and I'm not gonna DNF it. I'm gonna finish it, but this book is due in like 2 days to my library because somebody else requested it. So now I literally have to finish this fucking book. I think my problem with this book is that like, I'm interested for a chapter, and then the next chapter I really could give a fuck. It's very frustrating because like I don't think it's like badly written, but like there's so many new characters and stuff in this second half, and they're like X-Men taking down a prison to like release people from prison. Like, it's just not that interesting of a concept, and there's so many people to remember that like I'm kind of mixing them up a lot. Or they don't really feel that important to begin with, but anyway, I digress. My biggest issue actually Toyota. So I had to take my car into Toyota because it was making this awful grinding noise. and I didn't know what the fuck it was, and I brought it in, and apparently it was my fucking back brakes, which I had replaced only 2 years ago, less than 15,000 miles ago. They should not have worn out that quickly. And then the technician basically found out that they put on aftermarket brakes at the Toyota in New Mexico, did not fucking tell me, and those brakes wore out in less than 2 years. It was down to like 1 millimeter, like so fucking small, and it actually ruined my rotors and my shim. So I had to get everything replaced, and it was very expensive. And I just got off the phone with them, and the best that American Toyota can do is refund me $80 for the actual brake pads that I paid for 2 years ago. Yes, it was $79.98, and the rest of it was fucking labor, but like, and I know labor is expensive, but like, Jesus fucking Christ, are you fucking kidding me? That's all you can do. Anyway, I will hit you guys up whenever I finally finish Glass Sword. And honestly, I'm not sure if I'm gonna continue on with the series. A big part of me is gonna try, because I have the paperback version of King's Cage, and I love a good floppy paperback, so like I might try reading this that way, but at the same time, I kind of just don't care anymore. Like, I'm trying to just get through this book, but maybe King's Cage will be better. Like, maybe this is just really bad second book syndrome, but I'm also terrified because Warstorm, the last book of the series, is fucking ginormous, and like, if I'm already not liking a normal sized book, I don't really know if going to like a giant finale is like a good idea. So I don't know. Anyway, I'll get back to you guys when that happens. Peace out. So I have quite the update for you, because I did end up finishing Glass Sword, and it was like not a minute too soon before the fucking Kindle book was going to return itself. So I barely made it. And no surprise to anybody, I'm gonna give this book 1 star. I fucking hated it. I honestly did not like it at all. It was absolute torture to get through, and it took me almost a full month to read this, like actively trying to read this and like reading it almost every single night on my Kindle. That's a problem. The magic of the first one is completely lost on this. The main draw of Red Queen was like this really cool love triangle between Maven, Cal, and Mare, because Cal and Maven are fucking prince brothers, and it was like a really fun taboo love triangle, like what's gonna happen. And then all of a sudden Maven turned out to be this like crazy mad boy king, like a Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones, which is also popular of this time, and the story completely changes. Like, there was none of that in this book whatsoever. Like, it was all focused on Mare, and Mare is not a strong enough character to carry a whole fucking book, obviously. This just felt so flat and so hollow, and it was so fucking repetitive and boring. Like, we get it, dude. The dawn is red, and Mare is our silly little lightning girl that's gonna change everything, and she's gonna save everyone, which I really don't understand why, because she is just so unlikable of a character in general. She's nothing really going for her, and like, the more I read this, the more I realized this was totally a fucking Mockingjay ripoff, and we're supposed to care about her like a Katniss. Like, the first book felt pretty original in my opinion, and this book completely felt like a ripoff of Mockingjay. Like, completely. It was laughable. I mean, even to the point where there's like a fucking broadcast and Mare is like calling on people to join the rebellion. I'm like, Mockingjay, anyone? It was so ridiculous, like how much of this seemed to be stolen from that other popular book series. And like, whether or not that was intentional, it just felt too intentional. Like, everything in this book lined up to be like she was Katniss saving everybody, but like nobody likes her. She's so selfish and arrogant and thinks about nobody but herself. So like, why would they choose you as their fucking poster girl? Like, why would they ever choose you? Who cares about you in general? If you died, the story wouldn't change. Also, the entire book is just them searching for new bloods to like recruit to their fucking army to fight in the rebellion. That's it. That's the entire fucking book. And then finally in the second half, we're getting more and more characters because they're finding more new bloods. And that's it. I can remember 2 of them. 2. Cameron and Nanny. That's it. I don't remember a goddamn other one of them. Not one. I couldn't tell you any of their fucking names. I couldn't tell you any of their fucking powers. Nothing. This book supremely sucked. And if I had read this as it came out, I don't even know if I would change my opinion. I probably would have just never picked up the series again, because this was just so bad. And the second book syndrome wasn't even like the syndrome. It was like the absolute downfall of this novel. There's really nothing redeeming about it except for like the last 10% of this novel where Mare is captured by Maven, and that's it. Like, we had all of that to this. Mare is now captured by Maven, which makes sense because the next book is called King's Cage. I'm not kidding. That's literally all that happens. Like, I'm not even trying to like fuck with you guys. That's literally all that happens in this novel. Like, they're just going from town to town. Oh, and I forgot. There's this showdown in the prison, and then her brother Shade dies, and so does Queen Alara. Okay, so those are the 2 like big deaths, and we find out that Farley and Shade were like in a relationship, and they loved each other, and she's upset over Shade's death. Obviously, she's more upset over Shade's death than Mare is. I actually highlighted it in the book, and I have no idea where it is upstairs, but it was talking about how Mare was like, I don't even care about my brother's coffin. I'm only thinking about the second coffin, which had Queen Alara in it. Your brother's death like means literally nothing to you? She's like, oh, it's just too hard to manage. And I'm like, you can't not feel for that fucking long, dude. And also don't bring it up then. Like, don't give me that fucking line because you look like a heartless bitch. Anyway, speaking of King's Cage, I decided to continue on with the series. I'm fucking shocked, dude, that I decided to carry on, and I'm already like 100 pages in. Like, I purposefully, between last night and this morning, I'm like, I need to just like get into this because I had a feeling I would like this more than the second book, because at least in the third book, once I knew that Mare was captured by Maven, she'll be at the palace. And like, that is where the book kind of like shines. Like, she's really good at like court life and being like captured and stuff. I feel like that was just a really interesting thing to read about. So we'll see how this goes. But so far in King's Cage, it's already 1,000 times better than Glass Sword. A lot more's fucking happened. It's only been 100 pages. And I will say this has 500 pages in this paperback. So let's just hope I can actually keep up this pace. So far, Mare has been captured and she's obviously been like stuck in her room. And they again made her do like a little broadcast. It's so very Mockingjay, by the way, of like PETA on like the Tracker Jacker serum. They basically like tortured Mare and they're like, you're gonna read these lines and talk to everybody and tell them this little lie. It's literally like PETA and the Tracker Jackers. Again, stealing that fucking trilogy, but that's fine. And in this one, we're also getting another point of view, which is Cameron. So Cameron is one of the only people I remember from the last book. So Cameron is one of the New Bloods that like help them through the prison, because she basically acts as Silent Stone, and Silent Stone is like the stone that like silences all the Silver's power. So she can basically like shut down all your like senses and like kill you that way. Like you like just become blind and deaf and like die. It's a very interesting power of her to have. So we're seeing everything from Cameron's perspective on the front lines of the rebellion, and then we have Mare's perspective where she's being captive with Maven. And Maven, again, I just feel like he has like none of the charismatic elements of the first novel where he was very like slick. Now it's like complete Joffrey, like crazy, like just like weird, like power egomaniac. I don't know how to explain it. Like, he just is so different from the first book. And in the first book, he like, you knew he was slick, but he wasn't just like crazed for no reason. Mare keeps constantly telling Maven like, oh my god, like your mom like brainwashed you all these years and think for yourself. And I'm like, I don't know where we're going with this, but so far this is still a lot more interesting. The fact that I read 100 pages in like 12 hours, I think that says something. I'm really just motivated to finish this, because at least if I finish this, I'll feel pretty good, because Warstorm might take me a minute to get to, because that book is like very, very large. But I think at least getting the first 3 done, I'll feel like emotionally better that I'm almost done with the series, so I can like continue on with Warstorm, because like I have no idea what Warstorm's gonna like entail, but like King's Cage so far is like obviously a lot better than the second novel. So anyway, I'm very shocked that I actually decided to continue out the series, because I really was going to DNF this. And the only reason I did is because I picked this up immediately and started reading. And I was like, I'm just going to go into this. I'm going to force myself to do this, because at least this is like in the palace with Maven. So that adds another character back in that I really thought was missing from the second novel. So anyway, here we are. I'll talk to you guys later. So let's talk about King's Cage, which I finally finished, and not a moment too soon, because you know what? This series is getting old. I think I'm gonna lovingly give this 2 stars. So at least it's better than Glass Sword, but it's still obviously not as good as the first one, which is Red Queen. It might be one of those series where the first one is just the best one and everything after that is just kind of garbage. And I don't know, maybe I will like the 4th one better, but so far I'm not particularly excited to get into that. Let me just say that this had a lot more plot than Glass Sword. Like, I can really appreciate there's a lot more plot in here. There's also more POV. So we also have the POV from Cameron. We also have Evangeline's POV, and we have Mare's POV. So we have 3 POVs overall, and they are all very different, which I can definitely like appreciate that they all have like their own feel. I loved that Mare was captured in Glass Sword, and then in this one I was like, oh, we're gonna get to see the imprisonment. And I mean, the imprisonment part is like fine, but like she's constantly getting like PTSD about being imprisoned. Sweetie, you were imprisoned in a regal ass castle, you had 3 meals a day, you had personal healers, you had your own bathroom that was like really nice. Like, you were not being kept in a cell being beaten every day. I really don't understand why she has so much PTSD. And again, I just feel like it was trying to pull from the Hunger Games, where Katniss was having actual PTSD from like actual fucking war and like being in fight or flight her entire life. And there's no reason for Mare to have PTSD. Like, zero. She literally acts like she was like a true prisoner of war. Literally, you had like a comfy ass bedroom. Yes, you're being watched all day, but you had like a personal library and shit, dude. Like, you had so many privileges of a prisoner, and I understand that you were being held there against your will, but like, it was very much like Sansa in Game of Thrones. So if you've not seen Game of Thrones, you're probably not gonna understand any of these comparisons, but the Game of Thrones show and this book had way too many fucking coincidences for me to call them coincidences. And one of them is the fact that Sansa in Game of Thrones is being held against her will after her father is beheaded, and which doesn't exactly happen here, but no matter what, like, she is stuck in the castle and she's supposed to eventually be married to King Joffrey, whatever. In this book, Mare was originally engaged to Maven, who is kind of given like Joffrey vibes, like Mad King vibes, and I just find it way too coincidental. And Sansa in Game of Thrones was no longer betrothed to Joffrey, and instead someone else was brought in to be betrothed, which was Marjorie. And in this book, that is, I think her name is Iris, she's from the Lakelands, and they are betrothed. And guess what? Mare is still a fucking captive. Okay, and I'm telling you, like, the more I talked to my brother about this, by the way, the more angry I got, because I realized how much of a Game of Thrones ripoff this fucking was. Like, I'm not even fucking joking. And I happened upon a video from the author herself on Instagram, on an Instagram reel, where she talks about how much she loves Game of Thrones, and if you like Game of Thrones, you would enjoy her books. I'm like, you're stealing plot lines from the show. Like, no wonder people are gonna like see similarities, bro. Okay, let me get back to it. Mare is expected to play dress up and just like be at court. Okay, that's her whole expectation as his prisoner, which is the same exact thing as Sansa's. Like literally a princess still, like, you're being treated as royalty. You're just only allowed certain privileges. Like, you can't go about freely about your life. You're under constant watch. You have to play your part. Same exact fucking situation. Okay? And then Mare escapes Maven's clutches because she escapes during a wedding. Alright, is this ringing bells, anybody? She escapes during a wedding, and she was helped against her knowledge, like, she doesn't know this, by an old wise woman who happens to be Cal's grandmother. In Game of Thrones, we find out, I think it's like a whole season later, that Lady Olenna is the one who arranged for Sansa to escape during Joffrey and Marjorie's wedding, in which case Joffrey was poisoned. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that I think Maven wasn't poisoned, but there was like an attempt on his life while they were betrothed. And maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, the similarities are crazy. Also in this, Maven declares war, which Joffrey also did. I'm telling you, dude, like, this whole book, straight up Game of Thrones. Like, and Game of Thrones does it a lot better, okay? But like, the more I read this, the more I kept thinking, wow, this is really familiar. Wow, this is really familiar. I was like, that is the exact same thing that happens in this season. The exact same thing happens this episode. And like, as soon as I finished the book, I was like, that is dead ass. Like, it stole so much shit from Game of Thrones. It's not even fucking funny. I also want to point out that at the end of the book, Cal basically tells Mare that like they need to find somebody who can get into mines to fix his brother, which I know sounds absolutely ridiculous, but like, to me, I think it's just I've seen so many connections in this book, but it reminds me so much of in Game of Thrones. Obviously, Joffrey is a child of incest, so he's been inbred, and that's why he like can't control his emotions, and he's an angry, mad individual, okay? And in the show and in the book, they like, his mom also blames like how he acts on the fact that he was inbred. Like, he's never held responsible for his actions, just like Cal was like, we need someone to help fix him because my mom, Maven's mom, Alara, Queen Alara, she was the one who went into like Maven's mind as a kid and like constantly like messed with him and like took out things she didn't like. I mean, it's just so similar, the fact that like Joffrey was because of his mom and his dad being brother and sister inbreeding, and they created him, which resulted in obviously this problem. And I just think it was too coincidental that Queen Alara, his mom, like went into his brain and like messed with him, and now he's a mad bitch. And Cal is like asking for Mare to like help him and be like, give him like a break, like he's fucked up. Now, in terms of the audiobook, I do have some lingering questions, but why is Farley the only one with the British accent? If everybody that like grew up in her village and stuff is in part of this book and other books, why do they not have British accents? Because if she grew up in that village her entire life, why is she the only one with a British accent? You would not know that reading the book, but like, what is the point of that? It also doesn't make any sense, because if her father's like the colonel and shit, why does he not have a British accent? He also grew up in the village, like he raised her. Why would he not have an accent? Makes no sense. I also don't know why we got Cameron's perspective, because honestly, her perspective was incredibly boring. It was like Mare in the second book. Like, I really just did not care about her perspective at all. And it was brought up that she was like black with her braids constantly. Like, we understand, and especially on audio, like, it's very obvious that it was a black woman. And I just feel like, is that all this character has? Is that literally her entire like personality? No, it should be a lot more than that, babe. Come on. I also don't understand why Evangeline was given a perspective, and why is she a raging lesbian out of left field, dude? Like, she literally all of a sudden is like lesbian, like has this thing for Elaine or whatever the fuck her name is. I just feel like there's zero lead up to these random things that like the author thinks is like a huge plot device, and they're like, oh my god, like she's really secretly like, she just wants to be king, but she's been in love with this woman forever. And I'm like, I don't feel it at all. I feel like you're just telling me this shit to make people more interesting instead of giving them actual personality points. You know what I mean? I don't think the last in the series can fix any of these issues. But I'm gonna try. I already read 3 of the freaking 4 books, and there's other like spin-off books for the series. I'm not fucking interested. I really don't think I'm gonna read any of them ever, but I'm at least gonna finish Warstorm. So I'm gonna get into Warstorm probably in a couple weeks. Honestly, I need a break. I have the autumnal equinox for the Magic Readathon coming up, and that's gonna be a lot of books I have to read. And I'm just gonna read this whenever I fucking feel like it. It's probably gonna be late August, maybe September. I don't know. When I get to it is when I get to it. I mean, this is honestly a multi-month reading vlog, which I was not expecting, but like, it's just gonna happen that way. So, sorry for my rambling, but I really hate when stuff is almost like way too similar. And I have to say that other people did compare Red Queen to Red Rising, which I don't really see the comparison too much, just because I actually hated Red Rising, and the only similarities is like that people are separated by colors. But in Red Rising, there was like a much larger political system, and there's like pinks and greens. There's like other types of colorations and people. And this one literally just has like 2 or 3. So I don't really think that's a big comparison, but I do love the fact that she has plagiarism problems throughout every single one of her fucking books up to this point. So I'm curious what Warstorm is going to plagiarize next. I'm very excited to see what should have been copyrighted. So I made the heartbreaking decision to no longer continue with Warstorm. I got 30% of the way into the audiobook, and I decided that this is just not for me. I actually returned to the library a couple of days ago and have just had time to think about it, and I don't miss the book whatsoever. I don't feel guilty about not finishing the series. I gave it as good of a shot as I could. This reading vlog originally started in June. It is December. So this has been a 6-month journey, and I have tried my best, but I just don't care about this series. I stopped caring after the second novel because I didn't like Glass Sword at all. And the only reason I even went into King's Cage is because Mare was taken captive by Maven, which is like the best character out of the entire series. And he's not really present throughout the series, and that's a damn shame, because if he was, then I definitely would have rated all these books a lot higher, and I actually would have wanted to read them. The only one I wanted to read was Red Queen, so I just have to be honest with myself here. And since I already knew about the betrayal in Red Queen this second time around, it just wasn't as enticing. Like, this series I don't think is for me, because the first book really plays on the love triangle, and then every other book past that does not. And like, that's the one redeeming factor of the first book for me, because it was actually interesting. Pitting 2 brothers that don't even like each other, and they're half brothers, and you're putting them against each other. It was fucking prime entertainment, and it was so juicy that one of them turned out to betray her. It was good. And then that's like entirely dropped, and I have no idea why Maven is like out to get them in the first place throughout the rest of the series. There's just no good character motivations. There's no intrinsic motivations for any of these characters. I just don't care anymore. And I did end up spoiling myself for Warstorm, and as it turns out, Maven does end up dying in this book. And I almost wanted to continue when I found out that he had his own viewpoint, but when I found out that he was gonna die anyway, I was like, what is the point? Like, what is the point? This dude has no redemption arc. Like, there could have been so many cool ways that this series could have ended, where actually Warstorm ended up being one of my favorites in the series, after giving Red Queen a rounded up 4-star, I believe, Glass Sword 1 star, and King's Cage 2 stars, I think I rounded it up to. But yeah, Warstorm is not getting a rating. I am not getting even to the 50% mark to rate it as such. It's just gonna get no rating from me. I've thought long and hard about this, but I've just tried to read Warstorm a few times over the last few months, and it doesn't stick with me, and I don't care. They're introducing viewpoints that I just don't end up caring about. And even after I had the book spoiled, it doesn't make me want to read it knowing that even Maven had a viewpoint, and he is literally my favorite character out of the entire series. So it just wasn't enough to save it for me, and I will definitely not be continuing on with the novellas, which I know that there are. It's just a shame because when I first read Red Queen back, I think it was in 2015, easily it was my favorite book of the year. It was amazing. It was a 5-star experience. I loved it. And Glass Sword just like took such a departure from that I think it just colored the rest of the series for me, but I'm not wrong. Like, I did not enjoy the other books that I read. So do I feel guilty? No. And that tells me that it's not really something that's worth my time. And I have so many other series that I'd like to get to. And I read most of this like active series. I read most of it, and I didn't like 2 out of the 3 books that I read. And apparently for a name like Warstorm, there really wasn't a whole lot of like war happening. There wasn't like a big crescendo. It was kind of a letdown. So am I really missing anything? That's to be debated. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sure that this was an experience for you guys as much as it was for me, but let's not repeat the experience. Let me know your thoughts on the Red Queen series down below. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye!